The Engero Tales. The Genius African Boy Next Door, IBY's Amazing Story. Chapter 1, A Boy Apart. IBY was born on a warm evening in the village of Namwisi, the youngest of 3 children. From the moment he could speak, he was different. While other children played outside, IBY sat inside with books his father had carefully collected over the years. His father, a respected farmer in the village, was proud of IBY's love for learning but often worried that his son would never fit in. "Don't you want to play with the other children?" his father would ask, watching as IBY pored over the pages of books or tinkered with his small wooden toys. But IBY would shake his head, his eyes bright with curiosity. "I want to understand how things work, Papa. I want to know why the sun rises and how water flows." His mother, a kind woman who understood her son's yearning, would smile and nod. She knew that her son was special. But she also worried. The villagers, while proud of their traditions, were not quick to embrace change. At school, IBY excelled. While other children struggled with basic arithmetic, IBY solved complicated problems in the blink of an eye. His teacher, Miss Alice, marveled at his abilities but was often puzzled by his deep, abstract questions. "IBY," she would say, "you ask questions that even the elders cannot answer. You must be careful, my son. Some things are better left unexplained." But IBY was relentless. He spent hours after school experimenting with small mechanical gadgets he had fashioned from scrap metal and wood, trying to solve the world's most pressing problems in his own way. Chapter 2, The Struggles of the Village. The village of Namwisi had long been dependent on agriculture. The people cultivated maize, beans, cassava, and bananas. But in recent years, droughts had become more frequent and the crops were failing. The village's only water source, a river several miles away, was drying up. Women and children walked long distances to fetch water, sometimes traveling hours just to fill a few jugs. The village elders, wise but resistant to change, clung to traditional ways. They were deeply connected to the land and believed that following the customs of their ancestors was the only way to survive. "We have lived this way for generations," Elder Keto would say. "Why change what has worked for so long?" But IBY, who spent hours observing the fields, the river, and the skies, saw the cracks in the foundation. The old ways were no longer enough. He had an idea, a bold idea, but one that would take everything he had to bring to life. Chapter 3, The Seed of Innovation. One afternoon, after a particularly harsh drought, IBY sat by the river watching the water trickle lazily down the rocks. He noticed how the water level had dropped significantly and how the fields had dried up. The farmers were struggling, their crops wilting in the heat. "I could do something," IBY whispered to himself. "I could create a way to bring water to the crops without relying on the river." He went home that evening and began sketching a design. His mind raced with ideas, an irrigation system that could carry water from the river to the fields using gravity and simple pipes. It would be affordable, efficient, and could work even in dry seasons. For the next few weeks, IBY worked in secret. He gathered materials, bamboo, wood, stone, and metal that he could find in the village. His room became a workshop where he constructed his prototype. He used his sharp mind to design a system that could transport water from the river to the crops, relying on nothing more than gravity and a few simple mechanics. IBY's creation was modest, but to him, it was the solution the village needed. He had no illusions about how difficult it would be to convince the villagers, especially the elders, to embrace this new idea. Chapter 4, The First Rejection. When IBY felt his invention was ready, he gathered the courage to present it to the village elders. He approached them in the central square, where the community gathered for meetings. "I have a solution for the drought," IBY said, his voice steady but nervous. "A way to water the crops without relying on the river." The elders exchanged skeptical looks. Elder Keto, the most respected leader in the village, stepped forward. Iby, you are a bright boy, but what you suggest is far too complicated for us. We have been farming this way for generations, and we will not change it now. Iby's heart sank. But what if this can help us? What if it can make our crops grow even when the rains don't come? You are just a child, Elder Keto said sternly. You cannot understand the way the land works. Trust the elders, we know what is best. Iby stood quietly, his invention in his hands, knowing that he had no choice but to prove them wrong. Chapter 5: Quiet Revolution. Undeterred by the rejection, Iby continued to work on his irrigation system in secret. He refined his design, building a working model that could transport water from the river to a small patch of crops in the village. His hands became calloused from hours of labor, but he didn't mind. He believed in his invention. Then came the day that would change everything. The drought had persisted for weeks, and the villagers were growing desperate. Their crops were dying, and the women and children were struggling to gather enough water. Iby knew this was the moment to act. He went to the elders once more, this time with his irrigation system fully assembled. Please, let me show you what I've created, he said. This is our chance. The elders were hesitant but reluctantly agreed. With the sun setting behind them, Iby carefully set up his irrigation system near the fields. Slowly, water began to flow through the pipes, and to everyone's amazement, the crops began to thrive. Chapter 6: The Village Awakens. The results were undeniable. The crops that had once wilted in the heat now stood tall and strong. The villagers marveled at the change. They could hardly believe their eyes. Iby's irrigation system had saved the crops, and with it, their livelihood. Elder Keto, who had once dismissed Iby's ideas, now stood before him with respect. You have shown us that there is power in innovation. You have done what we could not. The elders recognized Iby's brilliance, and from that day forward, the village embraced change. They worked together, combining their traditional knowledge with Iby's new ideas. The irrigation system was expanded, and new methods of farming were introduced. Iby's reputation as the genius boy spread beyond Namwizi. People from neighboring villages came to learn from him, and his inventions, simple yet effective, began to transform the lives of many. Chapter 7: A New Dawn. As Iby grew older, he continued to invent new solutions to the problems his community faced. His work revolutionized agriculture, water management, and education in Namwizi. He taught the children how to think critically, how to question the world around them, and how to use their creativity to find solutions. The village flourished, no longer burdened by droughts or poverty. Iby's legacy became one of innovation, community, and hope. And though the old ways were still respected, the village had learned to embrace the future. Iby never sought recognition or fame. He was content knowing that his ideas had helped his people, and that they had grown to understand the power of both tradition and progress. His dream had been simple: to make the world better, and he had done so in the most extraordinary way. The end.